I would like to welcome all of you guys to our ALS Texas Advocacy Town Hall today. My name is Jessie Kellogg. I'm the Senior Development Manager for the Southwest area. I'm excited to discuss our approach to advocacy and how we partner with other organizations and the ALS community to impact public policy on a national level. If you guys can please type any questions that you guys have about advocacy in the chat. We're going to be having a Q&A with all of our speakers at the very end. If we don't happen to get to your question, we'll follow up using the email address you submitted whenever you registered for this event. This is recorded, so don't fret if you miss something. You will get sent this after the event is over. To kick us off, I'd like to welcome Steve Morris, the Vice President of Mission Delivery at the ALS Association of Texas, and Ashley Smith, the Director of Advocacy at the ALS Association. Take it away, you guys.
Thank you, Jessie. We appreciate everybody joining today, and thank you, Ashley, for jumping on here with us today. I do have to, first of all, before we jump into the questions, Ashley, I have to give you some street cred that you grew up in San Antonio, Texas. So even though you're up in the DC area, you have Texas roots. So
I do. I spent, my family's still back in Texas. My parents are in San Antonio, my sister's in Austin, so I get back as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So we're excited to talk about advocacy, but to start it off, can you just tell us a little bit about how the advocacy program at the ALS Association even works?
Absolutely. And thank you for letting me join you all today. I'm always excited to talk to all of our Texas advocates about our program and how we empower people living with ALS, their loved ones, and the entire ALS community to advocate on behalf of themselves. So every day at the ALS Association, I am focused on empowering people living with ALS and our entire ALS community to advocate on policy priorities that'll make a real impact in the lives of people living with ALS and their caregivers and their families and friends. And we accomplish this in a couple of ways. So we engage decision makers at every level of government to join our fight, whether they're mayors and council members in your cities and counties across the state, state legislators who go up to Austin every other year, or our federal policymakers or members of Congress who do much of their work up in DC, but also back home in district. And we accomplish this in a couple of ways. We send action alerts by email regularly to everyone who is signed up to be in our ALS advocacy email list. And we push out those emails on key issues as Congress is moving pieces of legislation through the process to get a bill from idea to a floor vote. And we also engage in advocacy in the real world. And so engage all the decision makers at city council meetings or in district events and meetings throughout the year. So I really encourage you, if you haven't already done so, please sign up for our advocacy action alerts and can do it at alstexas.org/advocacy.
Excellent. And obviously the ALS Association has been doing a lot of advocacy work through the years, but we're not the only organization that does this. And so can you talk a little bit about how we partner with other ALS organizations and just other healthcare organizations or other non-healthcare related organizations? We partner with a lot of people to accomplish a lot of our advocacy initiatives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So we will partner with anyone who wants to work with us and who has a voice in the space that we're working in. And so on any of the issues that we're working on, from increasing federal funding for research to telehealth access to Medicaid access, any issue of importance to the ALS community, if another organization or another group of people are advocating on similar issues, we'll partner with them to amplify our voice, because collectively we have more power and can reach many more members of Congress than we can as a singular effort. So we partner with ALS organizations like I Am ALS, and the Muscular Dystrophy Association, who are focused and serve people living with ALS and their families and communities every single day, as well as local organizations. And we also partner with other patient advocacy organizations like the National Organization for Rare Disorders, the American Lung Association, any other organizations that are working on behalf of patients and communities like ours in order to push forward patient protections, again, like Medicaid access, telehealth access, making sure that we all have the healthcare benefits we need to live full and productive lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And along with those organizations, can you talk about why it's crucial for us to have patients and family members and friends, just the whole community, get involved in advocacy? Like, why is that crucial and how does it make a difference?
Yeah, so we're really lucky in the United States. We have a representative form of government. And so every person in this country can make an impact in our government and the policies and legislation that they pass to improve lives. And so every one of you on this call has a member of Congress and 2 senators, as well as your state legislatures and your county and local elected officials. All of those folks can make an impact in our fight to make ALS livable while we work to cure it. And so we collaborate and we make sure that people living with ALS can share the impact of what it's like to live with ALS, because as constituents, you have a direct line to your members of Congress, to all of your elected officials. And quite honestly, although my lobbyist colleagues hate when I say this, you all have more power than we do, because you, again, have the power to reelect your members of Congress. And so especially in years like this, where there's a midterm election season, every year it's important, but members of Congress really respond when constituents make a request. And so that is why I'm focused every day to make sure that people living with ALS and their family members and loved ones and caregivers have all of the tools you need to make that process easy. Because I know it's super intimidating to meet with your member of Congress or to send an email or make a call to their office. And so we want to make it less intimidating, but also let you know that you have the most power and to make sure that you're using that power in effective ways.
Absolutely. So it's pretty obvious that just local advocacy affects national policy. You know, you mentioned people telling their stories and meeting with their local congressional offices. But yeah, there is power, and we've seen that through a lot of advocacy wins that we've had. So, well, thank you, Ashley. We're going to bring you back in a few minutes for the Q&A session. Right now, I would like to welcome Juan in a Million. This is his nickname, Juan Reyes. He is an ALS advocate. He's a veteran from San Antonio. So welcome, Juan. Thank you for joining us. Love the background. And just initially, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started as an ALS advocate?
There we go. I had to unmute. And I'm glad that my computer is cooperating with me. But thank you for that introduction. A bit over the top for my taste, but I won't deny myself. First of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you for inviting Sonny and I to hopefully help others understand the importance of being involved. And although ALS makes every day challenging, I personally live by the rule that life is beautiful and amazing even with a terminal condition. We have to find ways to get through every day, which I do with the support of my family and friends. And it's great to see some familiar faces and many names that I recognize from social media. I became involved with advocacy at the invitation of the ALS Association in 2016 when I was invited to Advocacy Week at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And that is when I and my wife, Meg, realized that we really did have to lend our voice to the ALS community because we were inspired by so many other persons living with ALS that were just putting themselves out there and making things happen. And so that's when I caught the bug. And I would say that Meg would agree with me that it really infuses us with life, energy, love, and just the momentum needed to keep moving forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Juan. And you've had a lot of experience with advocacy through the years. And, every June we have ALS Advocacy Day. And while it's virtual again this year, in the past, pre-COVID, we've gone up to DC in person, and you've joined us up there, as you mentioned. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience going up there in person for ALS Advocacy Day, what that was like? Just paint us a picture for those who have never been and maybe are interested in that.
All right. As you stated, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine hundreds of wheelchairs, walkers, rollators, canes, etc. Charging the Capitol peacefully, mind you, not like previous incidents, and making our presence known to our elected officials. It is a sight to behold. And then having the opportunity to engage with our elected officials or their staff and being able to share our stories, ask for their help in making ways to improve many of the needs that our community has, and then leaving the help, knowing that we did everything we could, and that our voice might have that impact that really makes a difference and possibly makes history, such as the previous accomplishments that our community has successfully brought about. It is an amazing experience. I would encourage anyone that is invited or has the opportunity to participate to do so.
Absolutely. And Juan, you joined us a couple months ago for some of our virtual visits with our congressional offices. And Ashley mentioned earlier, just the power is in the story. And your story that you told those congressional offices and the staffers there was very inspiring, and powerful. And so can you share part of that story just here today with the ALS community as maybe an example of how people can tell their own personal story?
Sure. Typically what I share with any audience that gives me the opportunity or a few minutes to share my journey, I focus on the fact that, one, I am a veteran, and veterans are twice as likely to be affected by ALS than the average population or general population. Recently, there have been studies that identify that certain career fields within the various services are up to 10 times more likely to develop ALS. And so that is a hot button when I share. Additionally, I'd like to share the personal impact that it has on our family and extended family. My story includes the fact that Meg and I adopted 3 children a few years back, and they're almost grown up and out of the house, but it's challenging for them to have found their forever family and then to be hit with my diagnosis and then living with the fact that they're gonna lose their dad eventually to ALS. Luckily, I'm a slow progressor and I'm still around to annoy them. But I also share the challenges that the general population of ALS patients have, and they are truly very difficult to overcome given our nation's healthcare system and the inequities that many ALS patients face. As everyone in the audience knows, personally, it is extremely difficult to live with the ALS. Not impossible, but very difficult. And so our elected officials need to know and understand that there are solutions out there, not just with potential treatments, but also improving our healthcare system and the resources that we need to have a good quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've advocated for many priorities through the years in your just your advocacy efforts, and some of these priorities have benefited the whole ALS community, and there have been some that have specifically benefited veterans with ALS. And can you talk about maybe some of those veteran-specific initiatives that have been passed because of everybody, the whole ALS community's efforts?
Well, I'd like to think it's because of me personally, but I know that's not true. As a community, and this includes all the organizations that are focused on improving the needs of the persons living with ALS. But my first foray into big ticket items was back in 16, and we were focused on passing the waiting period for SSI, and ultimately that has actually been done away with. And so, although I was involved in some of the efforts, it felt like a huge accomplishment for me personally, because I know that many persons or families need access to those benefits immediately. So that was a big win. Act for ALS is the most recent one, and that was very important to me as a veteran because it actually opened the door to pathways to experimental treatment through the VA, which has never existed. And so our efforts in getting that into the law actually made history for veterans overall. But that gets lost in the background because more importantly, it opened the opportunity to have all patients get access in the future to experimental treatments, which many of us who are living with ALS beyond the 2-year mark are typically denied being able to participate in many trials. So this is huge for our community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Juan. Thank you for your efforts throughout the years and continue efforts. And we're going to bring you back in a few minutes for the Q&A session. But right now, I'd like to welcome Sunny from Hico, Texas. She's an ALS advocate. And if you've ever met Sunny, her name is perfect for her and her personality. So welcome, Sunny. We appreciate you joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started as an ALS advocate?
Yeah, it's not fair to follow one, but keep going. There we go. My name is Sunny. I was diagnosed at 27. So I have had ALS for 7 years. I live in the booming metropolis of Hico, Texas, and I do a lot of awareness and advocacy efforts. I got brought in, I want to say it was 2017. I've gotten the opportunity to go to Capitol Hill 3 times, twice with the ALS Association and once with rare disease legislation. And though those experiences were completely different, it's still amazing to be able to be at the heart of where change happens and be able to lend my voice and my story and just encourage the people that are elected to those offices. My experience when they go to the floor and vote on things, and just giving this disease a face and their decisions, who they're impacting. And I highly encourage anybody that is even interested in advocacy to join the advocate that we shared in the chat. The ALS Association makes it so easy. They send you the form letters, they tell you who you're contacting, they draft the social media posts. If you do get the opportunity to meet either with the local office or the DC office, they'll coach you through what that experience is. So it can seem overwhelming at first, but they really hold your hand and make it the most efficient and effective process.
Yeah, thank you, Sonny. And you've, like you mentioned, you've been up to DC, experienced kind of those in-person meetings with our representatives and senators. And I know it's, for me, it's just, it's overwhelming to think that you can, like you just said, you can affect change in legislation. And so that's pretty powerful. You're involved in a lot of things. Maybe people on this call may not know it, but you write a blog. You've been featured in a number of publications, and just an incredible overall supporter of the ALS community. And so for people listening, if they want to get in, just get started in advocacy or just sharing their voice, what kind of advice would you give them?
My advice that I always give when I meet new people in this world is to lean in. ALS is so isolating, and like Juan said, it just makes the everyday harder. And the easiest decision you can do is lean into this community. And if you're not ready to share your story, share mine, share Juan's, share what the ALS Association is doing. And that connection and that empowerment from this community will help you form that platform to get started however you want to get involved. Whether that's advocacy or just awareness or being on clinical trials, anything you do is worthy of being shared, and this community is better for your voice.
Absolutely, that's great advice. And you've advocated, obviously, like Juan, for many priorities through the years, ever since your diagnosis. And so can you think about some of the initiatives that have been passed during this time because of your advocacy and others that have come alongside you?
The last time I was in DC with the ALS Association, something that hit the to-do list of like the week we were there was that NIV or BiPAP was headed to competitive bid. And at the time I was refusing to acknowledge that I needed a BiPAP, though it was sitting next to my bed. And so I really learned through those conversations how important it was for us to tell them why sending it to competitive bid was the worst thing that could happen for us. And someone in one of my sessions had talked about it's like being handed the keys to a Ferrari and not being taught how to drive it. And so really going to the people that were making decisions and letting them know on paper, this sounds like a good idea. And the numbers may support that idea. But as the person who's going to be directly impacted by this decision, please, I'm begging you, don't do this. And thankfully that didn't happen. So that was a big win. Like Juan talked about the Act for ALS, that was a huge deal. Getting to sit in my living room and watch President Biden come in and sign that into law just is amazing. And I am directly benefiting from that decision. I am in a clinical trial, well, not trial, but expanded access for one of the medications in the Healy platform trial. And I'm getting it for compassionate use. And that's something that wouldn't have happened before Act for ALS. Like Juan, I'm lucky to be a slow progressor. That luck only gets you so far. And so being able now to participate and be involved in finding that next medication, finding that next therapy that makes this disease chronic and not terminal. It really rejuvenates my spirit and empowers me to keep going.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunny. We appreciate just your efforts through the years and just your transparency with your own personal story. You've made a huge impact that you probably don't even realize the half of, but we thank you so much for your advocacy. So let's bring Juan and Ashley back now, and I think we're gonna jump into some questions. So.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and take a few minutes for Q&A, but I have to say, Sunny, I love what you shared about just sharing somebody else's story. I think it's so important that maybe you're not comfortable sharing your own yet. So being able to share these two incredibly powerful stories to really further that mission is absolutely huge. And also the beautiful picture that you painted, Juan, of peacefully storming the Capitol. I love it. So the first question that I have is, how can we get notified of advocacy events happening around the country?
Yeah, so I'll take this. Definitely make sure you sign up to become an advocate. So join our email list, but also make sure you're signed up with the Texas chapter. So I know the URL that got put in the chat will get you to both of those places so that you can join in advocacy efforts in Texas, but also international efforts. And just coming up in the next few weeks will be our National ALS Advocacy Conference. Unfortunately, it's virtual once again, but fortunately we can all gather together in a virtual environment and still learn about exactly what we're doing here today, learning how you all can influence the policy and advocacy process and make a real difference.
That's good. You guys continue to throw the questions that you guys have in the chat. And again, if there's a ton of questions that keep coming in, if we don't get to them all, we'll make sure to email you guys after. The other question that we have here is, if I don't qualify for SDI, is there another way I can get Medicare? Do you guys have any insight on that?
You don't qualify for SSDI. So just from some of what I know about Medicare, you had to have had a pretty consistent work history and paid into Social Security in order to qualify for Medicare. And so there's criteria that have to be met. For some people who are disabled who do not qualify for Medicare, Medicaid may be an option depending upon your monthly income. And so typically our guidance is usually if you don't qualify for Medicare and Social Security disability, then go the Medicaid route and try that. That's a difficult situation to be in. That's kind of the end of my guidance right there, but we can talk more specifically about your specific situation. We'll touch base with you. So.
And I was still on private insurance. The Healthwell Foundation was a good resource, and they were willing to help pay monthly premiums or medications. So that's a good resource to look into.
Great. Thank you, Steve and Sunny. Another question that we have here is, how can caretakers or former caretakers help?
I'll take that one. I'm involved with quite a few forums and Facebook groups, and we've often addressed the challenge of being a survivor of ALS as a loved one or family member, or even just a friend. And the entire community does benefit from your experience, your passion, and your desire to help. So I would encourage those in that capacity to continue being involved in the ALS community in whatever way they are comfortable with. It is very difficult to remain in the community and continue to see the loss that ALS creates. But as a caregiver or someone who cared for anyone in any capacity, to continue being involved is invaluable. Your experiences might just help someone take a step back from a very difficult situation or moment in their life. And you can never discount the possibility of just being present and a voice to help others navigate the world of ALS.
Yeah, so wonderful. That's so good. Go ahead, Ashley.
I'll chime in to just add on to what Juan shared as well. Caregivers and former caregivers are a huge source of our advocacy power, and we're focused on policies that are not only going to impact the lives of people living with ALS and making sure they have all the healthcare and benefits they need to live active and full lives, but also focusing on caregivers and caregiver supports. And so a couple of pieces of legislation that we're working on right now would support caregivers of former veterans with ALS, as well as working caregivers and providing a tax credit. So that's part of our coalition work that Steve and I talked about at the top of the hour. We work in coalition with lots of other patient advocacy organizations on caregiver support issues, and making sure that caregivers are getting what they need to continue to have good and productive lives as well.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, the next question that I have is, does the VA participate in clinical trials, and where is the best source to get information on clinical trials?
I'm sure Steve has more direct, may have more direct information on this. I will not pretend to be a VA expert or a clinical trial expert on the call today, but definitely one area that you can do that is by signing up for the ALS registry, and part of that sign up to become part of the registry and biorepository, you may get contacted about potential clinical trials. So that's just one way that you can learn about upcoming clinical trials.
Yeah, and there's another a good search site, NEALS.org, NEALS.org. The ALS Association is part of this consortium, and they have a really good search tool. And I think IMALS has a search tool, and there may be another organization that has these, but through NEALS, there's also a clinical trial liaison that you can actually call, and they can help guide you to any trials that you may qualify for. Juan, did you want to touch on the VA? I don't know if you're usually.
You bet. The VA does not engage with clinical trials, although they can identify trials for you if you ask about them. And that is the key with the VA. If you want to know, you ask. Otherwise, they don't really share voluntarily. And that's really because they're not in the pipeline for being involved with experimental therapies. They can only function in the way that they are allowed to by the federal government. So they have a lot of restrictions, or I like to say guardrails, that they have to stay inside of. Now, Steve mentioned I am ALS and NEALS. I'm an advocate and an ambassador for NEALS, and they have very good tools to help you navigate trials. IMALS also has a lot of good information on current trials, and they also evaluate and score trials on their ability to include the patient community and how the trial is designed. They don't give a good score if they're not patient-centric or designed in a humane fashion. So I hope that answered your question.
Good. Thank you, Juan, Ashley, and Steve for teaming up on that one for us. Okay, so Ashley, go ahead, Sunny.
Sorry. Just to emphasize what Juan said about you have to be your best and own advocate when it comes to clinical trials, when it comes to therapies. You know, I'm a big supporter of my multidisciplinary clinic, but that's not something that happens to me. It's something I'm engaged in. I go with questions, I go with ideas, things I've read about, and so I think it's important that you are involved in your treatment plan and your wishes as far as either clinical trial or equipment or any part of that. You have to be a part of the conversation.
That's good. Thank you so much, Sunny. So like you guys mentioned, we're getting ready to present this year's priorities at our annual June ALS Advocacy Day. Ashley, could you talk us through these priorities and why they are important?
So I think we have a slide, so I'll just wait until, there it goes. So like I mentioned, the goal of the ALS Association and the goal we're all working towards is making ALS livable while we're working to cure it. And we're doing this through three goals. So first is finding new treatments and cures. And there are a couple of ways that we're focused on achieving this goal through advocacy and public policy efforts. The first is expanding federal funding for ALS research. That's an annual campaign we run every single year. So thank you all for reaching out to your members of Congress and your senators, urging them to support our policy, our appropriations priorities, and increase funding for new programs as well as current programs that are running at the National Institutes of Health, the CDC, ALS Registry, as well as the Department of Defense. We're also working hard to ensure that the FDA is working for our community, ensuring that they're working swiftly and urgently to consider and approve new drugs. And we're also creating opportunities for people living with ALS to access new and emerging ALS treatments through the policymaking process. One of the ways we all accomplished that in the last year was the passage of the Act for ALS Act, but we're also focused on the Promising Pathway Act and any legislation that will get new and effective treatments into the hands of people living with ALS as quickly as possible. We're also focused on optimizing current treatments and care, and we're ensuring coverage of new ALS treatments, as well as increasing funding for programs that improve access to specialized ALS care. So we all know that over the last few years, with living in a global pandemic, telehealth access has been vitally important. And so through this, we are ensuring that everyone has access to telehealth and the specialized care you need from home. And then finally, we're working to prevent or delay the harms of ALS. So we're working to advocate for programs in Texas and in states across the country, as well as with Congress, to improve the lives of people living with ALS and their loved ones. So ensuring that Texas chapter support services have funding they need to continue doing their amazing and impactful work, making sure that everyone has the Medicare and Medicaid access they need to have the best health care. So really through these three mission pillars, we're hoping that we reach that goal of making ALS livable, and also working to speed the search for new treatments and cure, because we know without that, we won't be able to end ALS, which is our ultimate goal, and make sure that everyone is living their lives to the fullest.
Yeah, so good. Thank you so much, Ashley. Okay, Steve, if people want to get involved in advocacy initiative, what are some things that they can do?
Yes, and we've said it a few times, I think, and hopefully you've caught it, but I'm going to say it again. Sign up to become an advocate. And the URL is on there, alstexas.org/advocate. And so once you do that step, then Ashley mentioned this earlier, you'll receive notifications from the advocacy team when any kind of legislation is coming up that we need support on, or there may be legislation that we may be against sometimes that may be harmful to our ALS community. And so you'll receive those notifications through email, and your responsibility would be to then reach out to your local representative and the senators and let them know to support whatever initiative is going on at that time. So it's very easy. The advocacy team has done a great job at setting up templates. They already have pre-populated fields of, letters and things like that. It always helps to personalize your letters and your communications so that people understand that, these are living human beings behind these messages. And these are people that are battling this disease on a daily basis. And so giving your personal story is where the power is at, like we've said before. The next one is, as we've mentioned already too, is tell your story to anybody who will listen. You know, even if it's a neighbor or somebody, you never know what connections that you have that may, you know, kind of spiderweb out and make a huge impact in spreading awareness for ALS. And so tell your story, tell Sunny and Juan's story, like they've already said. Just tell the story, and it takes everybody's voice to increase the awareness out there. So the other thing that I'll mention too, specifically that's timely, that we need to do right now, actually today, is if you guys will contact both Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz and ask them to sign on to the ALS appropriations Dear Colleague letter. It just got started circulating, I think, on Monday. And so they need to support ALS research by signing on to that Dear Colleague letter. And so you can go to the URL that's on the screen and ask them to support ALS research by signing that letter. So that's specific, and I think the deadline is tomorrow. So please, everybody, go on and do that today or first thing tomorrow.
It is, unfortunately, this is the one year where Congress and the Senate is sticking to their deadlines for the appropriations process. So we need to make sure that all senators who want to sign and can sign that letter can do so by end of day Thursday. So thank you all for your very urgent action on that effort.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I hope everybody already copied and pasted that and put it in their computer, because we're already sitting right here. So I know I wrote something last week and I already have a response from Senator Cornyn in my inbox. So it has been really easy to sign up and to send stuff over and definitely personalize your letter. Everything is very simple, like everybody has said. So thank you guys. Thank you, Steve and Ashley and Juan and Sunny, for joining us today and your incredible advocacy work that really does make a difference in our ALS community. And I want to thank everybody on this call today for joining us and learning more about our ALS advocacy program. Just by being here, you are already an ALS advocate. We look forward to working with you to continue to make an impactful change for people with ALS and their families. Thank you all for joining us today.